Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to our show, The Awaited, which is dedicated to coming to know better the Imam of our time, alayhi salam. I'm Rebecca Masterton, and my guest is Sister Amina Inlows. And last week we were talking about evidences for Imam Mahdi alayhi salam in the Sunni collections, or what do the Sunni collections say about the Imam. We know there are some references to him, so what can we learn from this? How is he depicted in other schools of thought? Assalamu alaikum, welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Thank you for giving us your time again. Would it be possible, just for the benefit of viewers who couldn't see the show last week, to just briefly go over some of the points we talked about?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So last week, when we were discussing the subject of Imam Mahdi in the Sunni Hadith collections, we were speaking about first that while there are some people nowadays, especially people who don't have a specialization in religion, I guess more lay people, so to speak, who claim that belief in the Mahdi is not part of Sunni thought. And as a matter of fact, there's a number of scholars throughout history, in fact I would say it's a very normative viewpoint within the Sunni tradition, who did hold that the Mahdi will come at the end of time to bring justice and prosperity to the earth in a time of great injustice and oppression. And while a lot of the details about the advent of the Mahdi, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, are really the same in the Sunni Hadith books compared to the Shi'i Hadith books, which incidentally makes comparative discussion a bit boring. Nonetheless, there are some differences too. Some of them we were exploring. For instance, the question of whether the Mahdi will be from the lineage of Al-Hussein alayhi salam, or from the lineage of Al-Hassan alayhi salam. So we were looking into some differing narrations about that from the Sunni side, and why is it there may be a difference between some Sunni narrations and the Shi'i narrations on that topic. And then, as I recall, we were getting into the exciting question of whether the Mahdi, as described in the Sunni Hadith, is described as an Imam in the Shi'i sense. And then we had a mutual conspiracy, and we decided that we should leave everyone in suspense until next week. So that's where we left off.
Alhamdulillah, thank you very much. This is something that is interesting, because in my own sort of readings on a lot of the mysticism in the Sunni schools, they talk about this. They even mention him as the Mahdi, but they don't really define. There's no kind of clear definition of who he is, but they define the Mahdi in exactly the same way as he's described in Shi'i collections. But of course, that's in kind of the mystics who took from a lot of the Shi'i teachings, but the mainstream Sunni collections, I mean, how do they compare?
Well, keeping in mind that mainstream is a judgment call, what people may consider mainstream nowadays or in a certain place may have been quite different 700 years ago. I would agree completely that I think in more mystical or Sufi circles, the portrayal of the Mahdi within the Sunni tradition is very similar to within the Shi'i tradition. For example, a lot of times people will talk about the knowledge that the Mahdi will have, which is of a divine origin, not just simple memorization of the Holy Quran or something like that. And this, of course, matches very closely the Shi'i description. For example, it's said that most of knowledge is hidden to humanity, so when the Mahdi comes, he will bring all of it, whether it's spiritual knowledge, practical knowledge, technological knowledge, whatever it happens to be. So that's definitely a similarity, albeit more literalist or mainstream. People in the Sunni tradition may or may not agree with that, depending on their inclination. But I think definitely there's a lot of similarity in that regard, especially if you want to go especially deep into the esoteric realm and speak about theories of the perfect man or the pole of the earth and so forth, which presumably the Mahdi being the person sent by Allah to bring this revolution, spiritual and also practical revolution on earth, one would assume he would fill that job quite nicely, inshallah. But even taking it away from the more esoteric side, one of the things we were speaking about was the practical rule of the Mahdi. And we were speaking about the hadith of the 12 khulafa, that there will be 12 caliphs after the Holy Prophet, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and all of them will be from Quraysh. Obviously, no one disputes that the Mahdi is predicted to be of the lineage of the Quraysh. And we were talking about how Abu Dawood, one of the compilers of the 6 most influential Sunni books of hadith, actually put this narration in the chapter on the Mahdi, thus implying that his certainty that it's pertaining to the Mahdi, not pertaining to 12 other caliphs, not including him. This narration, of course, about the 12 caliphs coming after the Holy Prophet ﷺ, is found in quite many Sunni hadith books, including the very famous and often quoted book by Bukhari, Sahih Bukhari. And that brings up a very good opportunity to speak more in depth about a certain misconception that we brought up last week, which was there are people nowadays, again, people who are not religious specialists, who are under the impression that Bukhari and Muslim, the two most prominent hadith collectors in the Sunni tradition, did not include any hadith about the Mahdi. So they say, this is how the argument goes, it's not in Sahih Bukhari, it's not in Sahih Muslim, so therefore it's false. It's just one of these Shia fabrications. First of all, of course, I'm sure you'd agree with me that this line of argumentation is not correct. Bukhari and Muslim were very selective in their inclusion of ahadith, so just because a narration is not in one of these 2 books, that doesn't disqualify it from existence. There's many narrations that are not in these books. But more than that, there are narrations in their books which allude to the Mahdi. Now, I would grant people who make this argument, I would admit that they don't have special chapters on the Mahdi, but there are still quite a number of ahadith pertaining to the coming of the Mahdi. And this is one of those areas where this comes up quite frequently, so this is why I think it's a good match. We can, as the saying goes in America, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I don't know if you have the same saying here. See, cultural unity, mashallah. So this hadith of the 12 khulafa is also found in Bukhari. Now maybe someone might hear that and say, well, I don't see what that has to do with the Mahdi. So let's look at some other narrations in these books, with your permission, of course. There's a narration in Sahih Muslim. This is related from Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari. He's speaking with some people, and he tells them that there will be that he heard the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying that there would be a caliph in the last time of the ummah who would be freely giving out handfuls of wealth to the people without counting it. So the person who's relating this asks, do you mean this caliph is Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, who was well known for doing a lot of fairly decent things for the ummah? Actually, he did a lot of decent things, even for Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, giving back fadak, for example. Now, granted, the later caliphs took it back, but it was a very good gesture on his part to give fadak back to the descendants of Fatima Zahra, peace be upon her. So this person thinks that maybe this Khalifa is Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, but the person relating it says no, it's going to be someone else. And this narration is held to refer to the Mahdi. And I think we did bring up this narration last week, now that I remember, but we can talk about it in a bit more depth. Because no Khalifa, no president, no prime minister, no Bill Gates, no very rich person, there's no one in the world who just gives away handfuls of wealth to anyone and everyone. They may give away handfuls of wealth to selected people. I can think of several rulers in our history who have done that, but not to everyone, just left and right and not even counting it. But there will be such prosperity at the time of the Mahdi, so this will be something that will be possible and will be a characteristic of his rule. So this is one of the narrations about the advent of the Mahdi. There's some other very interesting narrations in Bukhari too, which we could discuss if you like.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see what, more in detail. We've got, you said that there was this misconception that he doesn't appear in there, and there is this narration about the army that will be swallowed up as it's heading towards Mecca. I mean, what does that refer to?
Yes, this is something which is mentioned, for example, I think it's in Bukhari, for example. It says that there's going to be an army that's going to march towards the house of Allah, and there's going to be someone from the Quraysh who is taking refuge in that house. So they're going to march towards the house of Allah, basically intending to kill this person. which of course is a very serious thing, because we know the house of Allah is a place which is supposed to be a place of safety and security. So if someone comes to Mecca to take refuge in the Holy Kaaba, it's a very serious crime for people to go and accost him there. And the way this is related in, I think it's Bukhari, Aisha, the wife of the Holy Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, says that she saw the Holy Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, suddenly, well, he's asleep and he's sort of very disturbed in his sleep. So she says to him, I've seen you doing something in your sleep that I never saw before. So the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, you know, it's very strange, it's amazing, al-ajab, that some people of my ummah will attack this house, or basically will converge on this house, essentially to kill someone who belongs to the tribe of Quraysh, while this person is seeking protection in the house. And then he continues, when they reach a place called Al-Bayda. Now this is an actual place between Mecca and Medina, this place called Al-Bayda. So it could very easily be referring to that place, or it could just be referring to some desert land. This narration is actually, it was brought up to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, of course, many years later it was brought up to him, and one of the companions of the Imam asked, what does this mean, Al-Bayda? So the Imam just said it means the desert.
Right,
so this is something that's related. But anyway, it's somewhere in the desert, perhaps that particular place, and then they're going to be basically swallowed up by the ground. They're going to sink into the ground, and thus Allah is going to protect them. So this is one of those signs of the coming of the Mahdi, or one of those predicted events of the coming of the Mahdi, which is discussed both among Sunnis and among Shia. And I think there's a number of things we can actually take from this narration, which I might add, as you very rightly mentioned, it is one of these narrations in Bukhari. So although it doesn't specifically say Al-Mahdi, first of all, it's narrated in enough other places that we know who this person of the Quraysh is. He's not just any Qurayshi, he is the Mahdi who's come to the Holy Kaaba to announce his mission. But also, keeping in mind that you know, he would have to be someone very important for Allah to make this gigantic sign on the earth to swallow up this army that's going to attack him. Now, of course, the soul is sacrosanct. The soul has sanctity, so of course Allah would protect anyone. I'm not saying he would or wouldn't. That's not my job to say what Allah would do. But I'm just saying the magnitude of this indicates it's someone who is very, very important. And it also is a reminder of the respect given to the Mahdi, even in these Sunni books as well. And essentially, this incident of the sinking of the army, it can be seen really as basically, if I can use a colloquial phrase here, Allah is just drawing the line. For tens of thousands of years, people have been killing prophets, killing the imams, doing all sorts of sins, you know, disobeying Allah left, right, oppressing people, tormenting people. So now, when the Mahdi has come, this is going to be the end of that. And these people are going to march towards the Mahdi to kill him and to put down his movement. And you know, it's as if Allah is saying, enough. You know, I'm not going to tolerate this anymore. You've had your thousands and thousands of years to do things your way. Now we're going to do things the right way. So those who come to kill the Mahdi will be taken. So this is one of the narrations in Bukhari in this regard.
What other ones might there be as well? We've also got the other books, you know, that have become canonized now in the Sunni collections.
Well, there's of course quite a lot of narrations about the Mahdi, especially keeping in mind we don't have to limit ourselves to the 6 books. That just makes it a bit easier to narrow the boundaries of what we're talking about. But even if we want to continue looking in Bukhari, for example, looking at what role the Mahdi will take in the time of his emergence, there's a very telling hadith towards the end of Bukhari. And the reason why I'm calling it a telling hadith is not because I really honestly noticed anything in particular about it, but the way it has been handled in the modern era has drawn bright red arrows pointing to it saying, look at this hadith. And this is sort of an infamous hadith nowadays because of this, which goes to show sometimes when people tamper with things, it has the opposite effect. The issue with this hadith is that while it exists in its presumably pristine form in Bukhari, In the certified English translation, again, it's been a little bit adjusted. And of course, this is the translation that various ulama have signed their names to. I don't know. Maybe they didn't really check every narration in the book. It's a big book. But it does appear as if someone is trying to sort of deflect the actual text of the hadith. Now, fortunately, and you may be familiar with what narration I'm referring to, because due to this appearance of tampering, it's become quite famous. Otherwise, maybe no one would really pay so much attention to it. But it's related that the Holy Prophet ﷺ said to his companions, how will you be, so how will things be for you, meaning the Muslims, when the son of Mary, so Jesus, peace be upon you, descends among you. And the Arabic says, وَإِمَامُكُمْ مِنْكُمْ, and your imam is from among you. Now, this is not complicated Arabic here. This is like first year Arabic, Al-Kitab fi Ta'allum al-Arabiya, beginning Arabic. Imamukum minkum. Your imam is from among you, obviously referring to the Mahdi. So there's an imam. Note I'm actually using the word imam, and there is Isa alayhi salam. They're also different people. What's interesting is the way this has been rendered into English, in that it says, how will it be when the son of Mary, i.e. Jesus, okay, I'm fine with that. You can say Jesus for the son of Mary, no problems there. How will you be when the son of Mary descends amongst you, and he will judge people by the law of the Quran and not by the law of the gospel?
God.
Now, did you hear Quran in that? Imamukum minkum. I didn't hear the Quran. I didn't hear Injil.
Yeah.
Now, to give the translator some credit, this is a medieval interpretation of the narration, but this is not a translation of someone's explanation of the hadith. It's a translation of the hadith. It's significantly far from the original meaning. Now, of course, and this is one reason, again, why people should be very cautious about relying on translated books. Even people who, when they want to talk about Islam, for example, people who are not Muslims, sometimes they receive a translation of the Holy Quran, which is a bit, it's just perhaps not the most responsibly translated translation. For example, I was noticing in a number of translations, when it talks about the wives of the Holy Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, azwaj, which I would translate as wives, it calls them consorts.
Right.
Which just has so many negative meanings in English. Why someone would do that is beyond me. But in any case, the point is one should look to the original text before passing, pardon me, passing a lot of judgments about this sort of thing. So in any case, the interesting story about the translation aside, this is a narration from Bukhari, which is very clearly referring to the Mahdi as the Imam. Similarly, there's another narration from Sahih Muslim, which we can talk about too, if you want.
Inshallah. Okay, yes, I think we just got a couple of minutes, so we could begin to mention the hadith, what it is, and then inshallah after the break. Continue. Okay.
Well, this hadith is incidentally in Sahih Muslim. It's not in the section on the end of the world. There's a very conveniently located section about a hadith pertaining to the end of the world. This is not in there. Instead, it's in the book of Iman, the book of faith, for some reason. Not that it matters with regards to the content. Anyway, this one's also related from Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, who's speaking about the events around this time when the Mahdi would come. So he says, Jesus, the son of Mary, peace be upon him, would descend, and the Amir of the Muslims, so the leader of the Muslims, would invite him to come and lead them in prayer. So the Amir of the Muslims asks Isa alayhi salam to lead the Muslims in prayer. But Isa alayhi salam says, no, some among you have been made commanders over others. This is an honor from Allah and for this ummah. So since we're about to go to break, I will leave this question out there. What does this hadith imply? There is a common interpretation in some Sunni circles that this means that Muslims have very honorable military leaders, amirs. So any one of these leaders, these amirs, will lead the prayer for Nabi Isa alayhi salam. So is this the way we should look at it, or is there another interpretation? And I will leave this question hanging as well.
Okay, thank you. We'll find out after the break. You're watching The Awaited. Inshallah, we'll see you in a few minutes. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to our show, The Awaited, which is dedicated to coming to know better the Imam of our time. Alayhi salam. I'm Rebecca Masterton and my guest is Sister Amina Inlows, and last week we were talking about evidences for Imam Mahdi alayhi salam in the Sunni collections, or what do the Sunni collections say about the Imam. We know there are some references to him, so what can we learn from this? How is he depicted in other schools of thought? Assalamu alaikum, welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Thank you for giving us your time.
Who claim that belief in the Mahdi is not part of Sunni thought. And as a matter of fact, there's a number of scholars throughout history. In fact, I would say it's a very normative viewpoint within the Sunni tradition who did hold that the Mahdi will come at the end of time to bring justice and prosperity to the earth in a time of great injustice and oppression. And while a lot of the details about the advent of the
again, would it be possible, just for the benefit of viewers who couldn't see the show last week, to just briefly go over some of the points we talked about?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So last week, when we were discussing the subject of Imam Mahdi in the Sunni Hadith collections, we were speaking about first that while there are some people nowadays, especially people who don't have a specialization in religion, I guess more lay people, so to speak,